Hey guys, today we're going to be going through all the books that I read in January. I read so much this month. I don't know how, quite frankly, but I did. And I think I read actually a lot of books that are quick reads for me, so like thrillers and romances. I read a lot of thrillers this month, actually, and that's not normally a genre I gravitate towards, but I had a couple like kind of hanging out on my like old backlist of books that I wanted to read and decide if I wanted to keep. Plus there was a couple new ones that I was interested in, so again, those are pretty quick reads for me, so I think that contributed to the number, as well as a couple graphic novels, so let's get right into it. So at the very beginning of the month, I read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is a very popular book here on BookTube and Book Talk and the internet in general. If you've read a thriller in the last couple of years, chances are it's probably maybe this one. And I don't know, I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides last year and I wasn't super impressed, so I did not have very high expectations going into this one, and unfortunately that was confirmed. I just don't love his writing style. It is very fast, so incredibly short chapters really make this like a incredibly quick read. Both this one and The Maidens kind of had like a psychiatrist, or like, what is the actual, he's like a psychotherapist sort of angle to it, and I don't know, I haven't really loved that. I was kind of disappointed with this one. The main driving force for me as I was reading this was like trying to figure out what this big twist is that everyone always talks about, and when I read it, like I didn't call it necessarily, but I also felt nothing, so that was kind of a bummer. If you don't know, sorry, I kind of skipped over the part where I talk about what the book is about. This psychotherapist named Theo is really intrigued by this one woman's case. She was accused of murdering her husband. Her name's Alicia, and she's a famous artist who was accused of murdering her husband, and after the murder, she is refused to speak. Theo is just convinced he is the one person that can figure this mystery out. And I don't know, there's reasons why he feels that way. It just made Theo a really annoying protagonist in my opinion, and while I don't necessarily need my protagonist to be likable, I just really did not like Theo, and it was not like in a fun way, so unfortunately this was a bit of a letdown. I gave it 2 stars, and I don't think I'll be picking up Alex Michaelides again, unfortunately, but obviously he works for other people, so I'm just really picky about thrillers in particular, so oh well. Then I picked up a very anticipated sequel for me, and that was Kingdom of the Cursed by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the sequel to Kingdom of the Wicked, and in that one, this young woman named Amelia in Italy finds her twin sister brutally murdered, her heart ripped out of her chest, and she vows to figure out what the heck happened, who did this. Amelia is a witch, as was her sister, and her grandmother has always warned her about the princes of hell and getting involved with them, and unfortunately in that one she ends up teaming up with a prince of hell named Wrath, and they have a really fun like enemies to lovers sort of like dynamic, and there was a lot of banter in that first one that I wasn't expecting because it's a very like heavy serious situation, and they're like cracking jokes at each other kind of, or like she's making fun of him, and I don't know, I had a lot of fun with it. And the central mystery of like who killed Amelia's sister is really intriguing. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of really cool lore with the Princes of Hell and just hell as a realm in particular. And this book takes place mostly in hell, as Amelia is sort of, I can't say too much without spoiling the first one, but she finds herself in this realm and having to navigate sort of the politics and sort of the rules of hell, and she ends up meeting more of the Princes of Hell, and it's a lot of fun. I will say I don't think everyone is going to love this. I gave it 4 stars, but like I don't necessarily think it was a great sequel. It really, for the like first 90% of the book, really abandons the whole like who killed Amelia's sister plot, which was like really her driving force in the beginning and like in the first book. Instead, there's like this whole tension between her and Wrath that they're navigating, and like again, 90% of this book is Amelia and Wrath desperately wanting to bone, and then they just don't for reasons. And it's like, did Amelia forget like what's going on here? I don't know. So I thought it was fun. but I don't think it's going to be what everyone is looking for out of the sequel. So I'm hoping that Carrie Maniscalco kind of like, the ending was interesting and it brought up some really interesting points that affect that central mystery. So I'm hoping the third one kind of addresses that a bit more, maybe kind of holds a better balance between sort of like the more relationship dynamics between her and Wrath, as well as the mystery of her sister. But yeah, I had a fun time with this. I gave it 4 stars, but I don't know. That's not like the most critical viewpoint, I think, of this book that one could take, because I was just having a fun time. So next, I picked up another backlist thriller, and that is A Good Marriage by Kimberly McCreight. This is more of like a crime drama, kind of. It's not quite so much of a thriller in the same sense that like The Silent Patient was. We follow a lawyer, and her name is Lizzie, and she gets a call from a former classmate, someone she went to law school with. He's in trouble. His wife was just murdered and he is being blamed for it, and he's in jail and he needs to be represented, and the only person he could think of or that he trusts to represent him is Lizzie. And she has not talked to this man in quite some time, but she does firmly believe that he didn't kill her. Like, she believes him. We sort of follow her as she navigates sort of her own mysteries, like within her life, as well as her classmates, whose name escapes me. Sorry, I'm bad with names. Oh my god, this is really bad. His name is Zach. That's my boyfriend's name. She firmly believes Zach did not kill his wife, but there is definitely something off about Zach, and she does also want to uncover who did murder Zach's wife and sort of bring justice in that regard. So I thought this was really interesting. This is, again, the lawyer sort of aspect of trying to figure out if your client is guilty or innocent is quite interesting. I think this would make a good, like, movie or one season sort of miniseries. There was a lot of really interesting sort of elements, and while I did guess certain things about the end, I thought it was written in a really satisfying way. Like, I don't necessarily need a thriller to, like, be so twisty that I can't call things, because, like, I want there to be build-up and I want the reveal to make sense. And I think Kimberly McCreight did a really good job of, like, leaving those breadcrumbs that, like, you could pick up on it, but you feel really good about picking up on it. You're like, oh yeah, I saw that coming. And like, you feel smart about yourself, you know? It's not necessarily a failing of the writing, like, because it's not glaringly obvious, but I had a fun time with this one and I gave it 4 stars. Next up is the book that Stephanie and I buddy read together, and that is Jade Fire Gold by June C.L. Tan. I did a vlog about this one, so you may know my thoughts already, but unfortunately this one did not live up to my expectations. I don't necessarily think it was bad, but the pacing was just way too fast for me. This is technically a standalone, though the epilogue does sort of leave a back door for perhaps a sequel, but I do wish the story that took place in this book had been separated into 2 to like allow it time to breathe and develop. June C.L. Tan has a lot of really interesting characters in this book that just do not have the time to develop, and like you don't have the time to get to know them enough to like them really. So we do have 2 main characters, and they are On and Alton. Alton is sort of an exiled prince. His father was assassinated and he has been living in hiding ever since. On doesn't really remember her past, but she knows she has magic, which is outlawed in this kingdom. She has a certain type of magic that makes her very valuable to Alton, and he sees her as sort of his way back to the throne. Their relationship is sort of enemies to lovers, but again, there's just like not quite enough time to really fully develop that. So like at certain parts, they're keeping secrets from one another, and like when those secrets are revealed, the characters feels betrayed, but like there's not enough time to linger on it. They kind of just have to forgive and move forward, and those moments just carry a lot less emotional weight because of that, I think. And again, I think if this had been separated into duology, you would have had a little bit more time to really revel in those feelings. This is a very plot-driven book, and it makes for a very fast read, but I really wanted something a little bit more character-focused out of this, unfortunately, and it just did not quite meet that. I am really interested in seeing other books by June C.L. Tan. I liked her writing, and I liked the characters she developed, and I thought the world was interesting, if not, you know, fully developed. But yeah, Stephanie felt similarly, and you can go watch my blog and our discussion about it if you want to see sort of more in-depth thoughts. I think the book itself, this is the Fairy Loot edition, is a little bit better than the actual contents, unfortunately, which is a bummer because I was really excited about this one. And I believe I gave it 3 stars, but that was probably a little nicer than I could have been. Yeah, so, oh well. And unfortunately, at the same time as I was reading Jade Firegold, I was also reading The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, which is just like in another league. It's, I mean, and we're talking about like, this is a YA book and this is an adult book series. So just content-wise, the stuff in this just hits you harder. But, oh my god, this is the 3rd and final book in the Poppy War series. Sort of unfair to be reading this at the same time and comparing it, but like where they're both sort of based in like Chinese history and culture, it was hard not to. But this book was amazing. I can't talk too specifically about it because I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't picked it up yet, but I strongly recommend you do if you haven't already, because the series is amazing. It explores sort of the aftermath and effects of war on young people, I think, extremely well. And in The Burning God specifically, we have a lot of, they're basically kids. They're like 20-something maybe, trying to fix their country and multiple generations worth of issues. It's just, it's very daunting. And Rin, our main character, is not the most stable person. So that's another sort of added layer of just, oh my god. But if you don't know anything about this series, it follows a girl named Rin. She is from basically the southern province of a proto-China, and she ends up getting accepted into the military school, Sinagard, and while she's there, war breaks out with the Mugen Federation, which is proto-Japan. She's thrust into this situation that she never really quite expected to be in, and during the events of this war, she develops this relationship with a god, like a phoenix god, and she's able to call fire, and she becomes a shaman, which makes her a very valuable asset. She finds herself kind of ping-ponging around different people who want to use her for their own ends. She has trust issues. She kind of has daddy issues. You watch her put her faith in like the wrong people, and it's really frustrating, but you also understand really fully why she makes all these decisions. And I think R.F. Kuang's done a really good job throughout this whole series of having you sympathize with Rin and go, yeah, like that's what I would do, or like that makes sense. And then like much later, Rin will be like looking back on that like, you stupid bitch, I can't believe I did that. And it's like, yeah, that was kind of dumb. So she's really good at like writing these situations that as they evolve really give you perspective on sort of things that happened before. And it's just so well realized. Again, she's written the situation that just, it feels hopeless, and having to watch these characters navigate that is so torturous, but you care about these characters. The betrayals hit so hard. The forgiving is just like an extra layer of like, oh god, people end up on opposite sides of a situation, and even though like politically they couldn't be more opposite, they still have like love for one another, or like respect at least for one another. It just makes the tragedy of the situation that much worse. And I've just gone on and on about this book now. Needless to say, I gave this 5 stars. I thought this was a fantastic end to the series. I didn't really know what to expect going into this one, but like in retrospect, I can't see it having gone any other way, honestly. Content warnings, again, obviously this deals very heavily with war. There's a lot of death and gore, mentions of sexual assault and violence. So if that's intense for you, I would definitely check out more sort of in-depth trigger warnings and stuff before picking up this series. Because again, very intense, very much an adult series, but really good, and I think really important, and I'm so excited to read the next book by R.F. Kuang because I think she's an amazing writer, and I can't wait for Babel to come out. I'm really curious to see what she does sort of outside the realm of the Poppy War. Another sort of mystery, not quite so much thriller, but kind of, is The Maid by Nita Prose. This book was so good. If you want like a character-driven mystery, this is your book. It's kind of compared to Clue, and I can kind of see like the winks at it. All the characters, or a lot of the characters, have last names that are colors. Our protagonist is Molly Gray. She works for a man named Mr. Snow, like at this hotel. The man that dies in the book is Mr. Black. Like, so it's got that sort of like quirkiness to it, but it's definitely its own thing. And in this book, we follow Molly, and she is a maid at a fancy schmancy hotel, and she loves this job. She is very much like routine driven. She's never on the page said to be on the autism spectrum, but it's very heavily implied. She mentions that she has a hard time picking up on social cues, and people in her life really take advantage of this. And as the reader, you're like seeing Molly kind of go down these paths because of these people around her, and you just want to like protect her because like the people around her suck. It's so hard to watch, but it makes Molly like a very endearing character. And again, I think like having you sympathize with her so much was a really great idea on Nita Prose's part. Like, you just want to protect her from the world, but then like she also proves to be very strong and capable. Like, she might be naive, but she's definitely not stupid. This book was just so good. And again, I've gone and skipped over the part where I say what it's about besides, you know, Molly. But yes, so she's a maid at this hotel, and one day she's cleaning this hotel room and she finds the resident dead. It's kind of ends up being pinned on her, and she has to kind of navigate her way out of the situation where, again, people are trying to manipulate her and use her and have her take the fall for things that she did not do because she's like different. Again, so frustrating as a reader, but it makes the ending like really satisfying. So I heavily recommend this. I think it's being made into a movie. I just saw this the other day. It got picked up like before it was even published because this book just came out, and like I think the movie comes out this year, and Florence Pugh is playing Molly, which is, I did not picture that, but I can see it now. But yeah, so pick this up before the movie comes out because I definitely recommend it. I gave this 4 stars. Next up, I read a couple graphic novels, and they're graphic novels 2 and 3 in a series, and that is Teen Titans Beast Boy and Teen Titans Beast Boy Loves Raven. I read the first installment, Teen Titans Raven, last year, and I quite liked it. I really like the art style. I've been following the artist Piccolo on Instagram for like quite some time, like before he was ever picked up as an artist for DC, because he's been doing like Teen Titans fan art for like a really long time. So when he finally like actually got a job at DC, I was like so proud of him. So the art style in this series is so good. I thought the first installment, the writing was a little weak. We follow Raven and her backstory, and unfortunately, like, she has like this weird case of amnesia in that one. So I think that made it difficult to sort of fall in love with that character in that one specifically, because she didn't even know who she was. But I liked where they were going with it. So when I saw that Beast Boy and Beast Boy Lovers Raven came out, I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick those up. And my best friend Stephanie let me borrow them. So thank you, Stephanie. I do plan on buying them at some point, but haven't gotten around to it yet. Beast Boy obviously kind of explores the backstory of Beast Boy, and he's kind of awkward or he's not awkward. He's physically quite small for his age, and he's really insecure about it, but he's got this big personality, and he wants to be a cool kid, and he realizes that these vitamins that he's taking for like some sort of like adrenal issue, I think that his parents say he has, is actually stunting his growth. And when he decides to stop taking them, he starts developing these powers that this medicine was suppressing, and he becomes Beast Boy. He's very confused by this, and this figure that has sort of been in all of the books so far has been Slade, and he's trying to recruit these superhuman or mutant teenagers for like experiments and stuff, basically. But Beast Boy doesn't know that, and he basically goes to, I think it's Nashville, to meet Slade. And while he's there in book 3, Beast Boy Loves Raven, he ends up meeting Raven, who is there for the same reason. She's there to meet Slade. They kind of keep running into each other, and Beast Boy starts to like really crush on Raven super hard, and she doesn't trust him at first, but their interactions are really cute. This one was a bit lighter, I felt like, in the beginning as they're interacting and they keep running into each other, but then like obviously the stuff with Slade gets complicated and they're kind of stuck in this hard situation. We also get a tease for the next one, which is going to be about Robin. And there's been a ton of Robins in DC, but this one is going to be Damian Wayne, who is the actual biological son of Bruce Wayne. And he's one of my favorite Robins. So I'm really excited to see where this comic series goes. It's been a lot of fun so far. I've really loved these characters since I was a child. I used to watch the Teen Titans show like as a kid, and I loved it. And these characters are just so fun, and there's just so much nostalgia there for me. So I'm really enjoying the sort of fresh spin we're getting on it. And unfortunately, I don't think the next one comes out until 2023, which I am incredibly upset about, but oh well. And I gave both of these 4 stars. Then I picked up a very anticipated romance, which is Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. She wrote The X-Talk, which I read last year and loved. And while that one dealt with like public radio and like a kind of more of a podcast spin, this has more of like a broadcast news spin. And I've mentioned it before, I used to work in broadcast news. I was really excited to see a like romance book kind of set in the context of working in a news station. And unfortunately, like there's not quite as much news in this one as there was radio in the X-Talk. So I was a little sad about that because that was one of the things I was most excited for going into this one. But it was still quite cute. I will say this definitely deals with like mental health issues quite heavily. So that might be not that like it's not important, because I think it definitely is, but that might not be what someone's looking for when they're picking up a romance, because there were definitely moments of this that got quite heavy, I thought. But in this book, we follow a young woman, Ari Abrams, and she is a TV meteorologist. She loves the weather. It's not just small talk for her. It's something she finds genuinely interesting. And as someone who is on TV, she sort of has this public persona of being really happy and cheery, and she feels pressure both from that aspect of her life and the fact that she deals with depression, and her mom also deals with depression, to kind of be happy all the time. She doesn't want people to know that she deals with depression, and it's always been very hard for her to be her full self with partners, and that is the reason for her most recent breakup. She was engaged at the beginning of this, but he felt like he didn't know the full her, so they ended up breaking it off, which has obviously been a bummer for her. But she meets this guy at her news station who's a sports reporter named Russell, and they sort of bond over the fact that their bosses both kind of suck. And again, their bosses are both at the same news station. Her boss is the chief meteorologist and his boss is the news director. And they actually used to be married to one another, but they've since divorced and have made everyone around them miserable as they fight at the news station a lot. And they sort of end up scheming to parent trap them back together in order to improve the workplace environment. And during the course of that, end up actually falling in love with one another. That was really cute, I thought. But again, it does definitely deal a lot with Ari's sort of depression and how she deals with it and how it affects her relationships, both like romantically and with her family. Because she holds a lot of resentment towards her mom for the way that her mom dealt with her depression. It's definitely a bit of a heavier read for a romance. So I did end up giving this one 3 stars just because it's not necessarily what I was hoping for. I don't think it's a bad book by any means, but again, I was really looking forward to more of like the newsroom setting or like the news related setting and context, and we didn't quite get as much of that as I wanted, and that was a bummer for me. So not a bad book, but I did like the X-Talk a smidge better. Then, because I wanted a very light, fluffy romance, I picked up Battle Royal. I always keep wanting to say Battle Royale, but that's a very different book. And this one, actually, I'm forgetting the author's name, Lucy Parker, by Lucy Parker. And this is sort of like a Great British Bake Off kind of inspired love story, which is so cute. Our main character, Sylvie, was actually a contestant on this show, and it's called Operation Cake. She was a contestant on this show back a couple years ago, and she kind of has like this famous sort of, not feud with one of the judges, but like one of her cakes literally blew up in his face and it like went super viral. And later during sort of the present day timeline, she's invited onto the show as a judge. So she's sort of back face to face with the judge that she didn't really quite get along with, and his name is Dominic. And they also both run bakeries. Dominic has kind of a legacy bakery, like it belonged to his grandfather, and they're really well known for creating like these very sophisticated cakes and such for really high profile events, including like royal events. And Sylvia's style is a lot more like Pinterest friendly or Instagram friendly. Like she does a lot of really crazy, decorative, over the top things. And they also run these competing bakeries across the street from one another. So there's this fun competition element between Dominic and Sylvie, both in that their styles are so different. She's like very happy-go-lucky, and he's again more like serious and reserved. So you have like this grumpy sunshine dynamic that I absolutely love. And then they're both actually competing for a contract for a royal wedding cake. Not like the princess or anything, or the prince or whatever. She's like I think actually she is a princess, but she's not like the crown princess. She's like the niece or something of the current king. It's still a very big event though, and a contract with this would mean like a lot for both of their bakeries respectively. And what starts off as sort of a competition between the two ends up sort of becoming a not quite a collaboration, but their relationship stops being so contentious, and they really start to bond over similar sort of issues and things that have happened in both their pasts. And there's a lot going on in this novel, I will say. It is almost 500 pages, which is a lot for a romance novel if you don't know. I'm sorry, it's almost 400 pages. A little bit less, but still a little long for a romance novel. And again, there's quite a bit happening, because you do have this Great British Bake Off element to it, but it is not the main focus by any means. It's sort of like a side gig for the both of them. But it's enough to sort of tickle that, like, oh, Great British Bake Off sort of part of your brain that likes that kind of cozy baking show. But it's cute. This book really took me by surprise. I thought it was going to be kind of mindless fluff, but there was a lot going on, and they both have issues sort of, or they've dealt with loss, like familial loss. And this book straight up made me cry in one part, because it deals with the death of a parental figure, and that hits really home, like hits hard for me. And so that was kind of intense. Just a heads up, if you plan on picking this up, that was a lot, but otherwise a very cute book. I loved it, and I believe this is part of a series, and so I will be keeping my eye out for the second one, because this was just so gosh dang cute, and I gave it 4 stars. Then after having this on my TBR for quite some time and being like weirdly nervous about picking it up, I finally read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This book follows a man named Kel, and he is an Antari, which basically means like blood magician. Like, he's very magical, and he's one of 2 people that can travel between these 4 separate realms. In his head, he sort of nicknames them like Red London, White London, Gray London, and Black London, because each of these worlds have a London in the same physical space, but that's like the only thing they all have in common. He's from a pretty magical London, Red London, but not all of the Londons have the same sort of relationship with magic as his does. He's initially sort of like a messenger between these 4 Londons, but is also kind of like a smuggler, just to kind of satisfy his own interests, really. He's not doing it for any like hugely specific reason. It's just something that he likes collecting things from all these Londons, even though they're technically contraband. He has a real rough day and ends up with this really dangerous object that could potentially destroy all of the Londons. One of them has already been destroyed like several years prior, which is Black London. He's got to try to find a way to get rid of it, basically, but he ends up being set up, he ends up being robbed, he ends up being hit over the head, he ends up with several wounds that literally he only doesn't die because he's an Atari and they're really hard to kill. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this book takes place in the span of a single day. So like the pacing is just kind of like, you're exhausted by the end of it, because Cal has just been through so much. And there's another character named Lila Bard, who is from basically our world, Grey London, no magic, but Lila has always sort of longed for more. She wants to be like a pirate or an adventurer, and she ends up running into Cal, and that sort of ends up working out for her. She goes from robbing him to being very loyal to him. They save each other's lives several times throughout the span of this novel, even though, again, it takes place in like a single day. So I do kind of wish there had been more room for their character and like relationship development, because again, it's quite a 180. Not that like Lila's necessarily bad to start off with, but they do get off on like the wrong foot. They recover quite quickly in the grand scheme of things. I did like this book. I gave it 4 stars because, again, pacing was not my favorite, and I do think it was like it just felt rushed, because like it's so plot driven, and like there's such a sense of urgency that they just need to go, that I think sort of where they end up at the end doesn't, like, I wish it had taken place over a longer period of time, I guess. So I'm hoping the second book allows for a bit more development and kind of takes a breath, but this is a very fun series. I can see why it's so beloved, and I'm eager to add it to my V.E. Schwab shelf. The last graphic novel I read this month was The Magic Fish by Trung Le Nguyen, and this was so good. The art is just adorable, and it's just made my heart melt, the story. Like, it follows a young boy. His parents are immigrants from Vietnam, but he was born and has been raised in America. He's trying to kind of figure out a way to communicate to his parents that he is gay, but doesn't really quite have, like, the right words. Like, he's not confident that, like, they'd understand. Like, that's just such a hard struggle to see, like, a little kid go through, but, like, there's this added element of, like, this takes place in the 90s. He goes to, like, I want to say, like, a Catholic school or something, and there's this one part in the book that just made me so mad because, like, one of his teachers figures out that, like, he might be gay and, like, has a priest talk to him. And it was just a lot. So I think if that's, like, a sensitive thing for you, that might be kind of intense. It certainly made me angry. But otherwise, this is a really cute book. The main character kind of uses fairy tales as a way to connect with his mom, and the fairy tales are familiar. So, like, there's a couple different versions of Cinderella that they go through, and then there's also, like, a Little Mermaid story. The art style as they're reading these stories really changes depending on, like, who's telling it. So when he's telling his mom one of the, like, the Cinderella stories, the art style is very, like, Western, like the fashion and stuff as well. There's a point where his mom and her aunt are, like, telling each other, like, a Cinderella story that is more part of, like, Vietnamese culture. It's very, like, traditional Vietnamese dress, and I don't know, it just, like, it really added a lot to the story and really made it feel, like, super multicultural, and I really enjoyed that aspect. It was so unique. And this was just a really touching book. I think this is, like, a must read. It's just a standalone. It's a really quick read as well, and I just loved it so much I gave it 5 stars. Then I got approved for an e-arc from NetGalley for one of my most anticipated books this year, which is Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. This is the second book to the Finlay Donovan series, the first one being Finlay Donovan is Killing It. And this series deals with Finlay Donovan, and she's recently divorced. She's a single mom, and one day while talking to her agent, as she is an author, is mistaken by sort of a bystander to be, like, a contract killer. That person tries to hire her to kill her husband for $50,000, and she's like, I'm not a contract killer. But she's very intrigued as to, like, why this woman wants this guy dead. It just, this whole series is truly like a comedy of errors, and she ends up in the middle of this very sticky situation. And her life is kind of a mess. Again, she's recently divorced. Her relationship with her ex is very contentious. She also sort of, like, starts a thing with a cop, but she's doing some very illegal stuff and doesn't want the cop guy to find out about it. Plus, again, she's a mom of 2 very little kids, and her nanny, Vero, sort of ends up becoming her partner in crime because Vero helps her hide a dead body. Not one that Finlay necessarily killed, but it's a messy situation. And the hijinks continue in the second book. I can't really delve too deeply into what the second book is about because the first book kind of left off on a cliffhanger, and the second book's main plot would kind of reveal that. I'm just gonna say this was a really fun book. I think it was a little bit more rushed than the first one because it had a lot to wrap up from the first one, and then it also had a bit to set up for the next one. So it kind of felt like a transition-y novel, but I did really enjoy how things developed. Her relationship with her ex, Steven, is very, I don't want to say nuanced, but, like, complex. There's still a lot of feelings there, even though she's like, we're never getting back together. Cue Taylor Swift. But, like, he's the father of her children, and she still really cares about him, and he's sort of involved with some stuff that she's trying to get him out of, but in doing so, again, is very involved in illegal activities. So it's a fun time. It's quirky, it's bizarre. It's gonna be a TV show, and I am so excited because I think it'll make an excellent one. And I love the writing, and I think the twists and turns were really good. I was so sure I had this one figured out, like, halfway through. like, I was smug about it. I was like, I know who the killer is, or who wants this person dead. And I was so wrong, but it's fine. It was still a great time. Highly recommend. I did give this one 4 stars, which I also gave the first one, but I will say this first one is a smidge better. But I think if you liked Finlay Donovan is Killing It, you will still like Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead. Very similar feeling, and it's a great time. And finally this month, are you tired yet? Because I am. I read No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a much hyped thriller. Again, I read so many thrillers this month. I don't know. Who am I? This was interesting. I've heard this advertised as like non-stop twists. That's not wrong, but I didn't feel myself being like, like I wasn't like so invested that it was blowing my mind at every twist and turn. Like, it was a fun book for sure, and I got through it really fast. And it also takes place within a single night, which definitely helps with the pacing. But I don't know, it was sort of hard. Our main character, Darby, makes a lot of really dumb decisions, and it's really hard to root for her at a certain point. But she goes through the freaking ringer in this book, and like, for that alone, again, it's hard to put down, because you're like, what could she possibly have to do next? But this book takes place again in a single night at a rest stop in the middle of a blizzard. Our main character, Darby, finds herself stranded there. She's trying to get home for Christmas. She's driving through the Colorado mountains, and a blizzard ends up kind of having her have to pull over into this rest stop. Her mom is unfortunately dying, and so she's frustrated that she can't continue her journey. She also left her cell phone charger at home, which is just like, Darby, why? But when she gets to this rest stop, as she's walking in, she sees the hand of like a child like around a cage bar in the back of someone's van. And she's like at first doubting, like, that's not what I saw. Like, that can't be what I saw. She confirms later it is what she saw. So she's trying to figure out who kidnapped this kid, what the heck is going on, what to do about it. And it's very intense. I will say that. I will say the bad guy is kind of revealed early on, so it's not really quite so much about, like, it's not a who did it or, like, a who is the child predator or kidnapper. It's Darby, like, fighting for her life and trying to survive the night. Because, again, with this blizzard, she's stranded. There's literally no way to leave this place, and she's in a very precarious situation, and, like, literally every decision she makes could mean life or death. It's intense. And as I was reading this, I was like, this would make a great movie. It's gonna be a movie out on Hulu in the end of February, so I'm curious to see how that is. I will definitely be checking it out. I will also say this is kind of, it's not super gory. Like, I've read gorier books, but like, there are a couple moments where it's just like, and like, it's a little hard to read. So if you're touchy about that, be warned. But it was a fun book. I gave it 3 stars just because it's like kind of ridiculous. And again, I never felt quite so invested that the twists really shook me, but I didn't hate it either, and I had a good time. So 3 stars. I liked it. Oh my God. That was a lot of books. Again, I don't know how I read this many books this month. It feels like some of the books I read earlier this month, I'm like, that was January? Like, it feels so long ago already. But yeah, I'm really happy with what I read this month for the most part. I don't think, oh wait, no, I was gonna say I don't think I read anything lower than 3 stars, but The Silent Patient. But it was still like entertaining. It wasn't like a bad 2 stars in the sense that like I regretted reading it. Like, I'm glad to know what the mystery was for that one, and now it's behind me and I can move on. So let me know down below if you've read any of these books. I would love to hear your thoughts. I read so many, I don't really know like what in particular one I would love to hear thoughts about, but like any of them at this point, let me know. I'd love to talk about books with you guys. And thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, check out my socials down in the description box below, and as always, have a lovely day. Bye.